And on a slightly different level, this again is another example of a sustainable project. It's a stool. It was designed by a student, one of my students called Rob Thompson. And he's created meaning through adding value to this product. So the way that it works is that you have this polyethylene-based polymer, and it's a very soft polyethylene in relative terms. So as you sit on the stool, it wears away, the material wears, to create or to make visible these patterns that are underneath the surface. The idea being, as you own this thing, it develops its own pattern or its own personality that is personal to you. You develop a relationship with it that makes you, I guess, value it in a different way. So again, it's not a sustainable material. It's not degradable. It's not from a non-petroleum source. It's not a sustainable material, but it's the application within something that makes it sustainable, that gives that product meaning and value. Okay, so back to research. As I said, research is kind of a fairly alien term to me until I had to start thinking about it for my research audit exercise profile. I thought, okay, so I had to talk about research today, and I looked up research, and I looked up, according to the RAE, how they define research. And they define it as research is to be understood as original investigation undertaken in order to gain knowledge and understanding. And I think this is quite important. I think that this kind of definition does kind of touch on a number of things that I do. I'm a practitioner, I'm a designer. I do a lot of writing, but I also do a lot of designing as well within this kind of field of materials. And I also teach. And I think the difficulty with the design profession and building a research profile is that it is driven by commercial projects and commercial briefs. And if you're a practicing designer, you have to find time in that commercial environment to do research-led projects. In academia, you have the luxury of having facility within your organization, within your institute, to pursue research. And I think that that's what education gives me. That's what teaching gives me. It gives me the opportunity to pursue projects that I think are interesting, that I think are valid, that I think contribute to knowledge or understanding of things. And I think maybe that is one of the reasons that the design has slightly lagged behind in terms of research. I also would say that I kind of work within an industrial context as well. I'm working with industries to help them or to criticize what they're doing and sort of offer new solutions. Again, through research, but through the benefit of being in academia, you can do these projects which are kind of more interesting and perhaps less commercial. So that was the definition of research, and I thought, okay, so where do we go from there? And I looked up the topics. Now, when you have to submit your research profile, there are 3 headings that you have to write about, and these are the 3 headings: brief description of the question that you're asking, the rationale outlining why the question was addressed, and the summary of approach. So I'm just going to touch on those 3 things. My research question is, how can text-based and visual references be used to give materials new meaning? And I'm going to explain why, and I thought that was a good question in a sec. But the rationale was because materials for designers need new markers. And these were just a couple of, I'm going to show you a couple of examples. But we were talking earlier over lunch about Ezio Manzini, who's just at a conference. And Ezio Manzini, if you don't know, wrote this fantastic book called Materials of Invention. And it was a very, very inspiring book. And when I was in college, everyone was reading Materials of Invention. And he talks about materials on different levels. He talks about the boundaries and definitions of how materials are changing, and how we don't have to rely on discovering materials anymore in the sense that through nature, but we can make materials. So therefore, how does that change the perception of a material that is wood or glass or metal or ceramic or plastic. And you know, kind of going back a few years, I was very inspired by projects like this. This is Daniel Biles' plastic bag radio. And for me, what was inspiring was how the use of material, the plastic bag, completely alters the context of the product and gives the product completely new meaning. He was my professor at college, so little wonder that I was inspired by him. And then this guy, Richard Wentworth, who is a sculptor, British sculptor, whose work deals with archetypes, and he's put together a number of books on misuse of objects. So, you know, using a stool to jack up a car, using a brick as a doorstop. And, you know, I was very inspired by this misuse of things, and this people, you know, in a very natural way in this context, giving things, objects, materials, new meanings. And, you know, if designers are now facilitators of experience, what does that mean in terms of material selection? Because if we kind of go back to a traditional method of presenting materials, you have something like this, a very traditional data sheet that gives very precise information on material properties, and it was designed for engineers, you know, who need yes, no answers. There's no room for ambiguity, misuse. But you know, that's kind of an old scenario. And as I said, you know, designers are facilitators of experience. What's the information that designers need now? And this was the question that, you know, going back to my question. So I kind of looked at how we could redefine that kind of data and give these new markers for designers. This was actually an exhibition that I had, I think, 3 years ago. This was the invitation, and it was very deliberately, you know, taking a data sheet and then kind of crossing it out with this little post-it note and saying, actually, you know, just come and have a look at it. It's all to do with touching and feeling rather than reading the data. So the summary of approach. So this is kind of the stuff now. This is stuff that I've done. That was my rationale. That was my question. The summary of approach. I started as I mentioned I designed furniture, and I did a project with a friend of mine, Dominic Jones, and the question that we asked was, if you take a nursery rhyme as a starting point for a piece of furniture, a table, where does that take you in terms of form, function, and material? And we just randomly picked 6 nursery rhymes, and we deconstructed them. So we had Wee Wee Winky, I'm going to read through it, runs through the town, upstairs and downstairs, in his nightgown, tapping at the window and crying through the door, through the lock. Are all the children in their beds? It's past 8 o'clock. So, you know, we dissected that, and we looked at a new function, and we looked at how we can create a table. So this is the table that we came up with, and kind of just to dissect that nursery rhyme, you know, it's based on steps. It's a children's bedside table, so it's to do with night, and it's to do with bed, and it's to do with light, and it's to do with a fluorescent laminate, which has a very, very strong glow. So that when the child turns out the light, you still have this kind of warm glow, keeping the child, you know, making it not so dark. And it does slowly fade, but it kind of maintains a glow throughout the night, a very soft glow. And then we had another nursery rhyme, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. So Humpty Dumpty became an outside table that used brick clay, based on the whole idea of the wall, and based on the idea of bricks being extruded, the process of extruding a brick, and how you can make a table that was extruded, and what that table would look like and what it would mean. So it's an outside table made of brick clay, and the kind of form is a little bit based on the egg, you know, Humpty Dumpty being an egg. So that was, I guess, they were designed objects. And then I became a little bit preoccupied with with materials in a written form, and I felt that you know, materials, going back to this kind of summary of intent, could be presented in a much more relevant way to designers.